the Xenobiological Dietary Compatibility Review for the Confederacy Medical Commission's Outer System Division, was a document that Eli Strand had read in full before his first posting, which was 4 years ago, and had read in full again before his current posting, which was 6 months ago, and had read relevant sections of at intervals between those two readings when the relevant sections were relevant, and had developed across 4 years of reading and application the specific, thorough familiarity with its contents that came from using a document as the primary reference for your professional function, and knowing it the way you knew things that were in your hands rather than just in your memory. He had been invited to the banquet because his division head had forwarded the invitation with the note: Varath Station diplomatic reception, interspecies, formal dress, thought you might enjoy it, covering for me, the division should have representation. The note had not specified what representation consisted of, which was the specific quality of division head notes that left the details to the recipient, which Eli had learned to find useful rather than frustrating, because the details left to the recipient were usually the details the recipient was better positioned to determine than the division head. He had worn his formal division uniform, which was formal in the way of formal dress for someone whose formal dress had been selected for function as much as occasion, and had gone to the banquet with the specific, ambient readiness of someone who was covering for their division head and was going to make appropriate conversation and eat the food carefully and not embarrass the division. The food careful part was the habit. 4 years of xenobiological dietary research had organized his relationship with unfamiliar food into the specific, automatic practice of someone who never ate anything without the background cataloging running, the identification of known compounds, the flagging of concentrations outside expected ranges, the cross-reference with the species-specific toxicity database that he had been adding to for 4 years, and that was the primary professional product of his work. He did not think about the cataloging while it ran any more than he thought about breathing while he breathed. It was simply present, in the background, doing what it did. He had been placed at a mixed species table of 8, which was the diplomatic banquet configuration for encouraging interspecies social contact in the managed, structured way that diplomatic banquets had evolved over several centuries to provide. His table had 2 humans, 3 Velathi, 1 Silvari, and 1 species he identified from the briefing materials as Keth secondary colonists, which was the category for species that had established their primary cultural development off their original homeworld, and had the specific, blended quality of cultures that had been doing that for long enough. The woman to his left was Velathi. He had registered this and registered her composed quality, the specific, formal bearing of someone who was in a professional environment and was occupied in it rather than performing it, and had returned to the table conversation, which was about the station's new transit corridor development and the various positions the various parties had on the development, which was the kind of diplomatic banquet conversation that was safe and substantive and gave everyone something to say. The first 3 courses had been unremarkable from a dietary standpoint, which was the correct outcome of a meal prepared by a team that had done the compatibility review correctly. The 4th course arrived. He looked at her plate in the way that you looked at something when the background process flagged it. Not the dramatic look of alarm, but the involuntary look of attention redirected. The eyes going to the flagged item, the way your eyes went to movement in the peripheral field. He looked at the sauce on the 4th course. He looked at it in the specific, methodical way of someone running the check that the flag required. The compound was valproic acid derivative secondary chain. Concentration approximately 0.3 millimolar. The species-specific toxicity designation for Velathi biology was class IV neural, fatal at concentrations above 0.1 millimolar. Onset within 4 minutes of ingestion. No effective intervention after metabolization begins. He ran the check again. The concentration was 0.3 millimolar. She was lifting her utensil. He did not have the time that thorough social calculation required. He had the time that was available, which was approximately 2 seconds, and he used it in the way that 2 seconds required. Not the considered way, but the committed way, the full allocation of available action to the available time. His left hand intercepted the utensil with the force of someone who was committed rather than tentative. His right hand reached for the plate simultaneously. The combined motion had a specific physical outcome. The plate went off the table in the direction that the force and physics determined, and it hit the floor of the Varath Station diplomatic reception hall, with the sound of a plate hitting the floor of a space that had been at the ambient noise level of formal conversation among 200 people, which was not a quiet sound, and was followed by a quieter space. He said at the volume that the now quiet space required. Valproic acid derivative, secondary chain, class IV neural toxicity, 0.3 millimolar concentration in the sauce. That's 3 times the fatal threshold for Valathi biology. He said it in the order of criticality, which was the what and then the why and then the number, because the number was what the security team would need immediately, and the what and why were what the table needed immediately, and immediately was what was available. Security was there in the specific, efficient way of professionals whose training had been for exactly the range of events that included this one. The food was taken. The analysis was run in the portable spectrometric unit that the security team carried for exactly this purpose, which confirmed the compound and the concentration with the specific, authoritative quality of an instrument's finding rather than a researcher's identification, which was important not because his identification was wrong, but because the distinction between the two mattered for the formal record. The hall processed the confirmation in the specific, collective way of a space receiving information it had been holding in suspension until the confirmation was available. He was aware of it, the specific quality of a room revising its interpretation of what it had been watching, in the peripheral way of someone whose primary attention was still on the person beside him. She was very still. She had been still since the plate left the table, which was the specific stillness of someone whose situation had undergone a significant revision in a very short interval, and who was present in the revision without yet being in the response to it. She was looking at the floor where the plate had landed, which was the look of someone looking at the object that contained the thing that was, in the revised situation, the significant object, and not quite ready to look at anything else. He was also still, which was what he had available after the 2 seconds of not still. The adrenaline that the 2 seconds had required was finding the body that had produced it, and the body was doing the specific biochemical work of processing it, which presented as sitting very quietly at a diplomatic banquet table and watching the security team execute its protocols. The extraction of certain individuals from the hall was smooth in the way of things that were smooth, because the people doing them had done them before and were doing them correctly. He watched it happen without knowing specifically what he was watching, which was the version of watching available to someone who had not been briefed on diplomatic security protocols and was observing their execution from outside that briefing. She had not moved, he had not moved. The table's other occupants had been moved by security to a different section for their own continuation of the banquet, which was the protocol for creating space around the individual at the center of the incident, and which left the two of them at the table in the specific, particular quality of a space that had been cleared of everything except what it contained, which was the table and the two of them, and the empty space where the fourth course had been. She turned. He was aware of the turning the way you were aware of things that had been still for long enough that the ending of the stillness had its own quality, the specific, complete quality of full attention being directed rather than ambient. He had a sentence. He had been organizing it in the interval between the confirmation and the turning, in the way that socially competent people organized the things they were going to say in situations that required saying something. Something accurate, something that did not perform more than the accuracy warranted, something that managed the acknowledgement at the level of the modest and the true. I noticed the compound, it's a professional habit, the cataloging. I'm glad the analysis confirmed the identification. I hope the rest of the evening. She kissed him. She kissed him with the specific quality of something that had been determined in the interval of the stillness. Not the tentative quality of an impulse being tested, but the quality of an arrival at the only available response and the execution of it. He was, in the first moment of it, in the cognitive state of someone who had organized a sentence, and the sentence was no longer the relevant item, and the current item had not been anticipated. And then he was in the other state, the state that arrived when the current item had been present long enough to be present in the full sense, rather than just the registered sense. It was not brief. It was the length of something that was communicating in the way that things communicated when the channel was chosen, because it was the most accurate one available, and the communication was not complete until the accuracy was complete. When she withdrew, he did not immediately speak. He did not have the right sentence. The sentence he had prepared was not right, and he did not yet have the one that was, and the interval of not having it was better than filling it with the wrong one, which was a principle he generally applied, and was applying now with more than the usual conviction. She also did not speak immediately. She was looking at him with the full, direct Velathy gaze, the complete attention of the direct look, which had the quality, as it had in the first registration, of being seen rather than observed. He became aware, sometime in the next interval, that the reception hall was doing its tentative return to function around them, and that the table in its cleared state was in the middle of the hall doing its cleared state thing, and that the two of them were at the table in the specific, present way of two people who were in a situation and were aware of being in it. The consultation room had been arranged by the security lead's assistant, which was the specific, practical competence of an assistant who had done this before and knew that the individuals at the center of a post-incident procedure needed a space that was not the incident space and had tea. It had tea. The security debrief had been efficient in the way of professionals who had the information they needed and were organizing it correctly. And when it was complete, the security lead had suggested the researcher could be thanked and released. And she had said no in the specific, quiet tone that the security lead had recognized as the tone that concluded that discussion. And so Eli was in the consultation room with the tea he had said yes to, and the situation he had not expected to be in, when he had covered for his division head at an interspecies diplomatic banquet. She told him about the tradition after he told her about the cataloging. He told her about the cataloging because the silence had acquired enough duration that something was going into it, and because accuracy was the standard, and because being accurate about what had happened seemed more important in this room than managing the impression of it. He had looked at the plate because the background process had flagged it. He had not been watching. He had not been performing vigilance. He had been eating the fourth course of a diplomatic banquet, and his training had done what his training did, and the result had been what the result had been. She told him the tradition's name, the Velathy term, which she said in Velathy and then translated. The translation approximate in the way that translations were approximate when the concept being translated was specific to the culture it had grown in, and did not have a full equivalent in the target language. The acknowledgment of irrevocable significance, the specific, physical expression of a principle that his species briefing had described in the academic language of an outside observer, and that he was now knowing in the other way, the way that came from encountering rather than reading. She told him what the tradition communicated. She told him what it was not attraction, not gratitude that needed to be separated from what it was communicating, not the performance of appreciation at the level of its social utility. She told him what it was, the demonstration that the person's existence had become permanent and significant in the moment they proved it was significant to them, that the human who had knocked the plate off the table in front of 200 people had communicated, in the knocking, that her survival mattered more than his dignity, and her tradition had exactly one response for that communication, and the response was the one she had given. "I thought you were going to thank me," he said. "I did," she said. He processed this. "That was the thank you," he said. "The tradition does not have a separate thank you," she said. "The acknowledgment contains the gratitude and the other things." "The other things," he said. "The things that come after gratitude when someone becomes irrevocably significant," she said. "Standard does not have a single word. The Velathi term covers all of it." He looked at the tea. He looked at his hands, which were around the cup in the specific, occupying way of hands that needed something to do and had found the cup. "The compound," he said. "Valthoric acid derivative secondary chain. It's not in the standard dietary compatibility review for Velathi cuisine. The review has the primary chain documented, but not the secondary." She looked at him. "The gap is a division issue," he said. "I'm going to file a notation to add it to the standard review protocols before the next event of this scale." "You are doing division work," she said. "The gap in the review protocol is what let the compound reach your plate," he said. "The food tasting protocol has the same gap. They were testing for the primary chain, not the secondary. The secondary was the point." She was quiet for a moment in the specific way of someone who had just received a piece of information that reorganized a question they had been sitting with. "You identified the secondary chain in a social context," she said, "without a spectrometric unit, from visual assessment of a sauce. The concentration was visible as a color variation in the sauce," he said. "The secondary chain derivative has a slight amber undertone at those concentrations. The ambient lighting in the hall was calibrated for the species range represented. The Velathi visual spectrum registers amber variations more precisely than human, which means the undertone would have been less visible to the humans at the table and clearly visible to the Velathi, except that the Velathi at the table were not expecting to be looking for it, and the variation was subtle enough that it looked like a sauce characteristic rather than a contamination indicator." She was looking at him with the full attention. "You saw it because you were looking," she said. "I was cataloging," he said. "I'm always cataloging, it's the professional habit." "You were looking for things that other people weren't looking for," she said. "I was eating the fourth course," he said. "The looking wasn't intentional." She was quiet again in the considered way. He had the sense that she was thinking about something that was not the compound and was not the review protocol, and that she was organizing it in the same way she had organized the explanation of the tradition, with the patience of someone who had decided how to say it and was taking the time to arrive at the saying correctly. "The acknowledgment," she said, "what it communicates, the irrevocable significance. In the tradition, the word is permanent." "Yes," he said. "That is the honest version," she said. "The tradition does not have a version where the significance is provisional. The acknowledgment is all of it, or it is a different thing." He looked at her. He thought about the plate on the floor of the reception hall, and the 2 seconds, and the sentence he had prepared, and the fact that she had said yes to tea and was not drinking it, because she had been in the specific, continuous quality of someone who was in the space after something significant and had not yet found the form of the space after. "I'm a dietary compatibility researcher," he said, "for the medical commission. I came tonight because my division head forwarded an invitation and couldn't attend." "I know," she said. "You know. The security debrief included your identification," she said. "Before the debrief, I had your division file from the event's attendee documentation." She paused. "The dietary compatibility review for the outer Confederacy systems is your division's work." "Yes," he said. "The review that has the gap you are going to file a notation about," she said. "Yes," he said. "Which means the gap in the review that allowed the compound to reach my plate," she said, "is a gap in the work of the researcher who identified the compound in the sauce." He processed this. "That's a significant construction," he said. "It is the accurate construction," she said. "The notation will correct it," he said. For the next event of this scale, she said. Yes, he said, for the next one. She looked at the tea. She looked at the table's surface, which was the plain table surface of a consultation room that had been arranged for function rather than occasion. She looked at him. The fifth course, she said. The banquet. I believe it was dessert, he said. The catering team reviewed the remaining courses after the fourth course incident, she said. The remaining courses are confirmed compatible. The catering team also reviewed the fourth course, he said. The specific, brief quality of the expression, not the formal register, not the acknowledgment register. The third one, the one with the dry quality that he had encountered in her once already this evening and was finding he was calibrated to now. The fifth course is dessert, she said. The catering team can be persuaded to serve it here. Is that a standard post-incident provision? He said. I am the Velathi Trade Commissioner for the Outer Confederacy Systems, she said. The catering team can be persuaded to serve it here. He looked at her. He thought about the forwarded invitation and the division head's prior commitment and the fourth course's color variation in the amber range, and the 2 seconds, and the sentence he had prepared, and the sentence he had not said, and the acknowledgment that the tradition had and that standard did not have a single word for. The notation I'm going to file, he said. The secondary chain derivative, the concentration range that produces the amber undertone. Yes, she said. I'll need documentation of the event for the notation's evidentiary basis, he said. The security report will have the spectrometric analysis. I'll need access to the analysis data. The security report will be filed with the Velathi diplomatic mission's incident record, she said. I can authorize access to the relevant analysis data for the notation's purposes. The authorization would need to come through the diplomatic mission's documentation office, he said. The authorization would come through the Trade Commission's infrastructure oversight coordination, she said, which I direct. That's a significant scope, he said. It covers the relevant range, she said. He looked at the table. He looked at her hands, which were around the teacup and which were, he noted with the specific, careful attention he was giving to everything in this room, steady in a way they had not been when she held them up to illustrate the shaking. The dessert, he said. Yes, she said. If it can be served here, he said. I believe it can, she said. Then, he said, the documentation access and the dessert are both addressable from this room. Yes, she said, they are. She had the specific quality now of someone who was in a space and was present in it rather than waiting for the space to resolve into the next thing. The particular, unhurried quality of being somewhere that was the right somewhere rather than the interval before the right somewhere. He was finding, in the specific ambient accounting that ran in the background of his awareness, the way the cataloging ran, that this quality was something he was in the presence of rather than observing, which was a different kind of accounting than the cataloging, and was one he did not have 4 years of professional practice in, and was doing anyway. The security lead's assistant knocked and came in with the dessert, which was the 5th course of the diplomatic banquet in the specific, formal presentation of a catering team that had been persuaded to serve it here, and was serving it here with the full quality it warranted. He looked at it. The dessert's compatibility review, he said. The catering team confirmed it, she said. For Velathi biology specifically, he said. For Velathi biology specifically, she said. And human, he said. The consultation room was arranged for the 2 parties present, she said. The catering team was briefed accordingly. He looked at her. The catering team was briefed that we were both here, he said. When I asked them to serve the 5th course in the consultation room, she said, I mentioned both parties. He looked at the dessert. He looked at the table. He looked at the consultation room, which was the specific, quiet quality of a space that had been arranged for a purpose and was now containing a different purpose, which was what rooms did when the people in them found purposes that the arrangement had not scheduled. The notation, he said, for the secondary chain derivative. Yes, she said. And the dessert, he said. Yes, she said. Both addressable from this room, he said. Yes, she said. Then there is no reason, he said, to be anywhere else at the moment. She looked at him with the full, direct attention, the complete Velathy gaze, and the third expression in its full form, the one that was not the formal register, and was not the acknowledgment, and was the one he was going to have a reading for by the end of the evening. No, she said, there isn't. Outside the consultation room, the diplomatic reception hall concluded its banquet with the specific, organized quality of a significant occasion completing its scheduled program, and the security team completed its documentation, and the evening moved through the part after the significant toward the part that followed that, which was the part that significant evenings produced when they had been what they were, and the people in them had been present for all of it. Inside the consultation room, two people ate the fifth course of a diplomatic banquet that neither of them had expected to be eating together, at a table arranged for function rather than occasion, with the specific, unhurried quality of people who were present in the right place and were not trying to be anywhere else. He had filed nothing yet about the notation. She had not yet authorized the documentation access. Both of these things were going to happen. They were happening later.